The mining station horizon spun slowly in the darkness of space. It hung between Mars and Jupiter, a gleaming metal wheel that pulled valuable metals from nearby asteroids. The station was home to both humans and aliens called the Nari. The Nari looked almost like humans, but had blue skin and eyes that could see in the dark. Han checked the oxygen levels on his tablet as he walked through the main hallway. The mining engineer was tall for a human, with short black hair and strong arms. From years of working in space, he had been on the horizon for 3 years now. At first, working with aliens had seemed strange, but now it felt normal. "Good morning, Han," said a soft voice behind him. Han turned to see Sora, the Nari mining supervisor. Her blue skin seemed to glow under the station lights. Like all Nari, she had 4 fingers on each hand and large purple eyes. "Morning, Sora," Han said with a smile. "I heard your son is visiting the station today." Sora nodded, her face bright with happiness. "Yes, Jin is on school break. He has been so excited to see where I work." She looked at her watch. "He should be arriving on the shuttle any minute now." Han liked Sora. She was smart and fair as a boss. From their talks, he knew she was raising Jin alone. The boy's father had died in a mining accident years ago. "Well, if you need someone to show him around the human parts of the station, let me know," Han offered. "That is very kind. Jin is very interested in humans. He has many questions about Earth." The station speakers made a soft ding sound. A calm voice announced, "Shuttle from Nari Colony arriving at Dock 3. Sora's eyes lit up. "That's his shuttle. I must go meet him." "See you later," Han said. He watched as she hurried toward the docking area. 2 hours later, Han was checking equipment. In Section 7, when he heard a child's voice, "Is that a real Earth plant?" Han turned to see a small Nari boy standing in the doorway. The boy pointed at the small cactus sitting on Han's workbench. Like his mother, the boy had blue skin and large purple eyes, but his face had the softness of childhood. He looked about 8 years old. "Sure is," Han said, bending down to the boy's level. "It's called a cactus. They grow in very dry places on Earth." "I'm Jin," the boy said. "Mom says I can explore a little while she's in her meeting." "Nice to meet you, Jin. I'm Han." He held out his hand and Jin shook it carefully, studying the 5 fingers with interest. "Does your mom know you're in the engineering section?" "Yes, she said it was okay as long as I don't touch anything important." Jin moved closer to look at the cactus. "Do all humans have plants?" Han smiled. "Not all of us, but many do." "Would you like to touch it? Careful of the spines, they're sharp." Jin gently ran a blue finger along the cactus. "It's bumpy. We don't have plants like this on our colony." For the next 20 minutes, Han answered Jin's many questions about Earth. The boy was smart and curious. He wanted to know about oceans, mountains, animals, and cities. Han showed him pictures on his tablet. "Jin," came Sora's voice from the doorway. "I hope you're not bothering Engineer Han." "Not at all," Han said quickly. "Jin's been good company." Sora smiled. "My meeting is done. Come, Jin. We need to get lunch, and then I'll show you the observation deck." "Can I come back later?" Jin asked Han. "You said you would tell me about elephants." "Sure, if it's okay with your mom." Han looked at Sora. "After lunch, I need to check the new mining equipment in Section 12, Sora said. "Jin, would you like to visit the recreation area while I work? It's right next to Section 12. "Can I go to the recreation area and then visit Han again?" Jin asked. Sora looked at Han with a questioning look. "I'll be here all afternoon," Han said. "He can come by whenever." "Thank you," Sora said. "Jin, say goodbye for now." "Bye, Han. See you later." Jin waved as he left with his mother. The alarm blared through the station 3 hours later. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Han dropped his tools and grabbed his emergency kit. His tablet showed the alert. "Decompression in Section 12. All personnel evacuate." Han's heart pounded. Section 12, where Sora was working. And the recreation area was connected to that section. Jin might be there. He ran toward Section 12, joining other workers hurrying through the hallways. The station's emergency doors were starting to close, sealing off the damaged section to protect the rest of the station. When Han reached the entrance to Section 12, he saw Sora pounding on the thick glass window of the sealed emergency door. Her face was twisted with fear, her eyes wide with panic. Several other workers stood nearby, their faces grim. "My son!" Sora screamed, her voice muffled by the thick door. "Jin is in there, in the recreation area." Han pushed to the front of the small crowd. Through the window he could see into Section 12. Small objects floated in the air. The oxygen was venting into space. The connecting door to the recreation area was visible from where they stood. It was closed, but that didn't mean much if the oxygen was gone. "Station Commander Day is on his way," said a human technician. "The emergency systems are working as designed. The section is sealed. But my son is in there." Sora's voice broke with desperation. The station commander arrived moments later. Day was an older human with gray hair and a serious face. He quickly assessed the situation on his tablet. "The sensors show a major failure in the outer hull of Section 12, he said. "The emergency systems have sealed it off to prevent cascade failures." "Commander," Sora pleaded, "my son Jin is in the recreation area. We must open the door and get him out." Day's face softened with sympathy but remained firm. "I'm sorry, Supervisor. Sora, but we cannot open these doors for 12 hours. It's protocol. The structural integrity of this entire quadrant is at risk. Check the life signs in the recreation area," Han suggested. Day tapped on his tablet. His expression fell. "I'm sorry. There are no life signs registering in that section. The oxygen levels they're at near vacuum." Sora made a sound Han had never heard before, a wail that seemed to come from the deepest part of her being. She sank to her knees, pressing her blue hands against the glass. "No. No, Jin. My Jin," she sobbed. The other Nari workers moved to her side, putting their hands on her shoulders in a gesture of shared grief. Han stood frozen, his mind racing. The boy who had been so excited about elephants just hours ago was now supposedly gone. But something wasn't right. Han had helped design some of the station's sensor systems. He knew their limitations. "Commander," Han said quietly, "may I see the sensor readings?" Day handed him the tablet. Han studied the numbers, the layouts, the emergency protocols. Something caught his eye, a small inconsistency in the pressure readings. "Commander, the maintenance pods in that section, they're separate from the main environmental systems, right?" "Yes, but they're not designed as escape pods," Day said. "They're just for repair work." Han looked through the window at the sealed section, then at Sora's crumpled form on the floor. The boy had been clever and curious. If the decompression happened slowly enough, if he had been near a maintenance pod, there might be a chance, Han whispered, more to himself than anyone else. There might be a chance Jin is still alive. The command center of the Horizon mining station was busy with people working to fix the problem. Station Commander Day stood in front of large screens showing maps of the damaged area. Sora sat in a chair nearby, her blue face pale with grief. Two other Nari workers stood beside her, their hands on her shoulders. Han studied the station plans on a small screen. His fingers moved quickly over the diagrams of Section 12 and the connected recreation area. The main hull breach happened. "Here," Commander Day said, pointing to a red spot on the screen. "It wasn't a big hole, but it was enough to set off the emergency systems. The whole section is now sealed off, and my son is in there," Sora said in a hollow voice. "You're saying he's gone?" "The station AI confirms it," Day said gently. Oxygen dropped to near vacuum levels within 2 minutes. The recreation area was not designed to seal separately from Section 12. He looked truly sorry. "I wish I had better news," the station's AI spoke in a calm female voice. "Confirming 0 life signs in Section 12 and attached areas. All biomonitors offline in that section." Han frowned. He walked over to a different screen and pulled up more detailed readings. Something wasn't making sense. "Commander," Han said, "look at these pressure readings. The drop wasn't instant. It took almost 3 minutes for full decompression. 3 minutes isn't much time to find safety, said Day. No, but it might be enough time to get into a maintenance pod, Han insisted. He pointed to small circles on the map. There are 3 maintenance pods in that area. They're designed to stay pressurized during repairs. Day shook his head. The pods aren't showing as activated, but that doesn't mean they're not being used, Han argued. The pods have manual controls. If Jin got into one and closed the hatch, he might still be alive in there. Hope flickered across Sora's face. She stood up quickly. Is this possible? It's a very small chance, Day said carefully. And even if it were true, we still can't open the emergency doors for 12 hours. The structural integrity. My son could be dying in there while we wait, Sora said, her voice rising. I understand. Your pain, Day said firmly. But I have to think about everyone on this station. Over 300 lives. Opening those doors early could risk everyone. Han looked at the screens again. He thought about Jin's curious eyes, his excitement about earth plants and animals. He thought about the promise to tell him about elephants. Then he looked at Sora's face, twisted with grief and now a tiny spark of hope. What if we don't have to open the main doors? Han asked. What if someone in a proper spacesuit went in through the emergency access tunnel? Day turned to him with shock. That would still require overriding safety protocols. It would put the volunteer at extreme risk, and it still might endanger the station if anything goes wrong. I'll go, Han said simply. The room went quiet. Even the busy workers stopped to look at him. That's against all protocols, Day said. I can't authorize it. With respect, Commander, I helped design the safety systems on this station. I know the risks, and I know how to minimize them. Han's voice was calm but determined. If there's even a small chance that boy is alive in there, we have to try. Han, Sora whispered. Why would you risk your life for my son? Han looked at her. Because on Earth we have a saying, no one gets left behind. Especially not children, T. Crossed his arms. The answer is no, Engineer Han. That is my final word as station commander. Han nodded slowly. I understand, Commander. But in his mind, Han had already made his decision. 30 minutes later, Han was in the equipment room near the sealed section. He had told everyone he was going to rest in his quarters. Instead, he was putting on a heavy-duty spacesuit, the kind used for external repairs on the station. The suit could keep him alive in space for up to 8 hours. As he checked the oxygen levels, the door opened. Han froze, expecting to see Commander Day or security officers. Instead, Sora walked in. Her eyes widened when she saw him in the half-donned spacesuit. I thought you might do something like this, she said quietly. The commander will punish you severely for breaking protocol. Han continued putting on the suit. Probably. But I've run the numbers. I can get in through the maintenance access tunnel in Section 11. It connects to Section 12 through a manual override hatch. You've thought this through. Sora came closer. But why? You barely know Jin. You barely know me. Han snapped the last seal on his suit closed and picked up the helmet. 3 years ago, my sister's son was caught in a fire back on Earth. A stranger ran into that burning building and saved him. I wasn't there. I was up here in space. But ever since, I've promised myself that if I ever had the chance to be that person for someone else, I would take it. Tears filled Sora's purple eyes. In Nari society, we don't do things like this. Our rules say the group must be protected first. Individual risks are not encouraged. Humans are a bit different, Han said with a small smile. Sometimes, we break the rules when it matters most. He put on the helmet and tested the communication system. Can you hear me? Sora nodded. I need your help, Han said through the suit's speaker. I need you to disable the alarm on the access tunnel door. Can you do that from your supervisor terminal? Sora hesitated only briefly. Yes, I can. Good. When I get inside Section 12, communications might not work well. Don't worry if you don't hear from me for a while. What can I tell you about Jin that might help you find him? Sora asked. Han thought for a moment. Is there any particular place in the recreation area he would go if he was scared? Any games he likes to play that might give me a clue where to look? He loves to collect things, small objects, toys. He always has something in his pockets. Sora thought harder. And he's very good at hiding. When he plays hiding games with other Nari children, he always finds the smallest spaces. That was useful information. Small spaces like a maintenance pod, Han said. That's good. He picked up a portable toolkit and attached it to his suit. Then he took a small emergency medical kit designed for Nari physiology. One more thing, Han said. If I find Jin alive but injured, what should I know about Nari children that might be different from humans? Our blood is purple, not red, Sora said. And our body temperature is lower than humans. What feels cold to you is normal for us, Han nodded. I'll remember that. He checked his suit systems one last time. I should go now. The longer we wait, the less oxygen Jin will have if he's in a pod. Sora suddenly reached out and touched Han's suited arm. Thank you, she said. No matter what happens, thank you for trying. Han gave her a small nod. I'll find him if he's there, I promise. As he walked toward the access tunnel, Han tried not to think about the danger he was putting himself in. He tried not to think about breaking direct orders from the station commander. He only thought about a small blue boy who wanted to learn about elephants, and a mother whose heart was breaking. Behind him, Sora worked quickly at a terminal, disabling the alarm that would alert security to his entry into the access tunnel. As the door closed behind Han, she whispered a prayer in the Nari language, a mother's plea to the stars to bring her son back safe. The access tunnel was tight and dark. Han moved slowly, his spacesuit making soft sounds against the metal walls. The flashlight on his helmet showed the way forward. He had to crawl in some places, the heavy suit making it hard to move. Sora, can you still hear me? Han asked into his helmet microphone. Yes, came Sora's voice, slightly broken by static. You are approaching the manual override hatch to Section 12. Han saw the hatch ahead. It was a round metal door with a large wheel in the center. A red warning light flashed next to it. I'm at the hatch, Han said, going radio silent while I override the lock. It might set off alarms in the command center. Understood, Sora replied. Be careful, Han. Han connected a small device to the control panel next to the hatch. The device would trick the system into thinking this was an authorized emergency entry. It wasn't perfect, but it might buy him some time before Commander Day realized what was happening. The device blinked green. Han turned the wheel on the hatch slowly. It was stiff, but it began to move. He knew that once he opened this door, he would be entering a section with no air. If his suit failed, he would die in seconds. With a final turn, the hatch released. Han pulled it open and quickly moved through, closing it behind him. He was now in Section 12. Everything was floating. Tools, papers, clothing, all the things that had been in the section when the air vented into space now drifted like they were underwater. But this wasn't water. This was a deadly vacuum. Han turned on his suit's magnetic boots. They locked onto the metal floor with a clunk, letting him walk normally instead of floating away. I'm in Section 12, Han said into his radio, moving toward the recreation area. Only static answered him. The communications were already breaking down, just as he had expected. Han moved carefully through the floating debris. His suit's external thermometer showed the temperature was dropping fast. Without air to hold heat, the section was becoming as cold as space itself. The recreation area was through a door at the end of a short hallway. Han had to push aside floating chairs and containers to reach it. When he got to the door, he found it was already partially open. The pressure from the air venting must have forced it that way. Han squeezed through the door into the recreation area. His heart sank at what he saw. The room was in chaos. Game tables were overturned. A large screen on one wall was cracked. Small toys and game pieces floated everywhere. And it was getting darker as the emergency lights began to fail in the cold. Jin, Han called out, even though he knew the boy couldn't possibly hear him through the vacuum. It was just instinct. Han swept his helmet light around the room. 3 doors led to other areas: bathrooms, a small kitchen, and a storage closet. He checked them one by one, finding nothing but more floating items. Where were the maintenance pods? Han consulted the small map on his wrist computer. There should be one in this area, possibly hidden in a wall or ceiling panel. As he searched, something caught his eye: a small blue toy floating near the floor. Han picked it up. It was a little model of a Nari ship. Next to it was another toy, then another, forming a line leading toward the back wall. Han followed the trail of toys. They led to a panel in the wall marked Maintenance Access. The panel was slightly ajar. Hope surged in Han's chest. Could Jin have gone in there? Would the boy have been smart enough to seek shelter in a maintenance pod? Han pulled the panel, fully open. Behind it was a small tunnel, just big enough for a child or a crawling adult. His suit was bulky, but Han forced himself to squeeze into the tunnel. The toys continued inside, floating in a line as if dropped one by one. At the end of the tunnel was exactly what Han had hoped to find: a maintenance pod. It was a small, egg-shaped chamber built into the wall, designed for workers to use during repairs. The door to the pod was closed. There was a small window in the pod door. Han pressed his helmet against it and shined his light inside. At first he saw nothing. The pod looked empty. Han's hope began to fade. Then something moved in the back of the pod, a small blue hand. Jin. The boy was curled up in the far corner of the pod, his eyes closed. He looked unconscious, but he was definitely alive. He must have crawled into the pod and closed the door when the air started to disappear. The pod would have held some air, but not much, and that air would be running out. Han turned the external handle on the pod door. It was designed to open, even if the power failed. The door swung outward, and the last bits of air from inside the pod escaped in a small cloud of frost. Han quickly moved into the pod, closing the door behind him. The pod was now sealed again, but there was no air inside, just Han in his spacesuit and the unconscious boy. Working fast, Han checked Jin's condition. The boy's skin was very cold and his breathing was shallow, but he had a pulse. Han had to get oxygen to him quickly. The spacesuit had an emergency respirator, a mask connected to the suit's oxygen supply. It was designed for humans, but it might work for the Nari boy too. Han carefully placed the mask over Jin's mouth and nose, adjusting it to fit his smaller face. He turned the oxygen flow to its lowest setting, enough to help the boy breathe, but not so much that it would harm him. Jin's eyes fluttered. The oxygen was working. "That's it, buddy," Han said, even though Jin couldn't hear him. "Just breathe." After a few moments, Jin's eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, then widened in confusion and fear when he saw the space-suited figure looming over him. Han quickly pulled back a bit and gave a friendly wave. He pointed to himself, then made a walking motion with his fingers, then pointed at Jin. "I came to get you." Jin seemed to understand. His small hand reached out and touched Han's helmet. Han could see the boy's mouth moving but couldn't hear the words. Han pointed to his ear and shook his head. "Can't hear you." Then he pointed to the mask on Jin's face and made a thumbs up. "Keep that on." Jin nodded weakly. Now came the hard part. Han had found Jin alive, but they were still trapped in a section with no air. The maintenance pod was not connected to the station's main systems and had no way to communicate with the outside. They would have to go back the way Han had come. Han looked at the small boy. Jin was very weak and clearly suffering from oxygen deprivation. He wouldn't be able to walk, and he certainly couldn't survive in the vacuum outside the pod, even for a few seconds. Han would have to carry him. And somehow they would both need to share the oxygen from Han's suit until they reached safety. Han checked his suit's oxygen levels. He had used about a quarter of his supply getting here. That left enough for about 6 hours, if it was just him. Sharing with Jin would cut that time significantly. There was no time to waste. Han gently picked up Jin, cradling the small blue boy against his chest. He showed Jin how to keep the respirator mask pressed to his face. Before opening the pod door, Han looked down at Jin and gave him an encouraging nod. Jin, despite his weakness, returned the nod. Han reached for the door handle. It was time to start the journey back. Han opened the maintenance pod door. The cold of space hit them immediately. Jin pressed closer to Han's chest, his small hands gripping tightly to the spacesuit. The oxygen mask covered most of his face. Han stepped out of the pod with Jin in his arms. The magnetic boots made a clunking sound as they connected with the metal floor. Han moved slowly, careful not to jostle Jin too much. The boy needed to keep the oxygen mask in place. They had to get back through the recreation area, then through Section 12, and finally through the access tunnel to safety. It had taken Han about 30 minutes to get here. Going back would take longer while carrying Jin. Han looked down at the boy. Jin's purple eyes were half open, watching Han's face through the helmet. The boy looked scared but trusting. "It's going to be okay," Han said, even though Jin couldn't hear him. "We're going home to your mom." They moved through the small tunnel that led back to the recreation area. Han had to crawl on his knees while holding Jin with one arm. It was difficult in the bulky spacesuit, but Han pushed forward. When they reached the recreation area, Han stood up and checked Jin. The boy's breathing seemed steady, but his skin was getting colder. They needed to hurry. Han moved as quickly as he dared through the floating debris. Toys, papers, and equipment drifted around them like strange underwater plants. The recreation area was getting darker as more emergency lights failed. Just as they reached the door to Section 12, Han's helmet radio crackled to life. Han, can you hear me?" It was Sora's voice breaking through the static. "Sora, I hear you," Han replied. "I found Jin. He's alive. We're heading back now." There was a pause. Then Sora's voice came back, thick with emotion. "You found him? My Jin is alive? Yes, he's weak but alive. We're in the recreation area moving into Section 12 now." "Commander Day knows what you've done," Sora warned. "He's very angry, but he's also sent an emergency team to meet you at the access tunnel. They'll be waiting when you get there." "Good," Han said. "Jin needs medical help as soon as possible." As they moved into Section 12, Han saw that the damage was worse than before. The initial hull breach had been small, but the vacuum of space was slowly pulling at the weakened section. Small cracks were appearing in the walls. Han checked his oxygen levels. They were dropping faster than expected. Sharing with Jin was using up the supply quickly. They had maybe 30 minutes left. "Sora," Han said into his radio, "tell the team to hurry. Our oxygen is running low." Only static answered him. They were too far from the access tunnel for the radio to work properly. Han moved as fast as he could through Section 12. Jin was getting heavier in his arms, but Han refused to slow down. Every minute counted now. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the section. Han looked up to see a ceiling panel breaking loose. It fell in the strange, slow way things fall in zero gravity, floating down toward them. Han twisted to protect Jin, taking the hit on his back. The impact knocked him forward and he lost his footing despite the magnetic boots. He fell to one knee, still holding Jin tightly. Pain shot through Han's left shoulder. The panel had hit him hard. But there was no time to worry about that now. He pushed himself back up and kept moving. The damage was getting worse. More panels were coming loose. The station was groaning around them, metal twisting in the cold vacuum. "Almost there, Jin," Han said, looking down at the boy. Jin's eyes were closed now. The oxygen mask was still in place, but his breathing looked shallow. Han pushed through the pain in his shoulder. The access tunnel was just ahead. A few more minutes, and they would be there. Another loud crack, much bigger than before. Han looked up to see a large section of the ceiling breaking apart. He had no time to move out of the way. Han turned, curling his body around Jin to shield him. The debris hit Han hard, knocking him to the floor. Something sharp pierced the outer layer of his spacesuit near his right leg. A warning light flashed inside Han's helmet. The suit was damaged, but the inner layer was still holding. For now. Han pushed himself up, fighting through the pain. His right leg wouldn't take his full weight. He limped forward, still carrying Jin, moving by sheer determination now. The access tunnel hatch was just ahead. Han could see it, the round metal door with its wheel lock. Safety was on the other side. Han's vision was starting to blur. The oxygen levels in his suit were critical now. He had given too much to Jin, not enough for himself, but he was so close. With his last strength, Han reached the hatch. He turned the wheel with one hand, still holding Jin with the other. The wheel was stiff, harder to turn than before. Han's injured shoulder screamed with pain. Finally, the hatch opened. Han pushed through, pulling it closed behind them. They were in the access tunnel now. Still no air, but away from the damaged section. Han's legs gave out. He fell to his knees in the tunnel, still holding Jin. The warning lights in his helmet were flashing red now. Low oxygen, suit breach, critical systems failing. Just a little further, Han whispered. His breathing labored. He crawled forward, dragging himself and Jin through the tunnel. The world was turning gray at the edges. Han's lungs burned for air. Ahead, a light appeared. The other end of the tunnel was opening. Figures in spacesuits rushed in. The emergency team Sora had promised. Han held Jin up to them. "Take him first," he managed to say. Strong hands took Jin from his arms. Other hands grabbed Han, pulling him the rest of the way through the tunnel. The inner door closed behind them. Air hissed into the small chamber they were in, an airlock between the tunnel and the safe part of the station. Someone was removing Han's helmet. Cool air rushed over his face. He gulped it in desperately, his lungs burning. "Jin," he said, his, voice a croak. "Is Jin okay?" "They're taking care of him," said a voice. "You did it, Han. You got him out." Han's vision was clearing now. He was lying on the floor of the airlock. Medical staff were working on Jin nearby, fitting an oxygen mask made for Nari over his face. The airlock's inner door opened. More people rushed in. A flash of blue skin. Sora, pushing past the medical team to reach her son. "Jin! My Jin!" she cried, dropping to her knees beside the boy. Jin's eyes fluttered open at the sound of his mother's voice. His small blue hand reached for hers. Han tried to sit up, but the pain in his shoulder and leg was too much. A medic pushed him back down. "Don't move," the medic said. "You've got a puncture wound in your leg and a dislocated shoulder. And you're suffering from oxygen deprivation." Han didn't care about his injuries. He watched as Jin was placed on a stretcher. The boy turned his head, looking for Han. Their eyes met across the airlock. Jin raised his hand in a small wave. Han smiled and waved back before the medics carried the boy away. Sora stood over Han now, tears streaming down her blue face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my son when everyone said it was impossible." "Not impossible," Han said weakly. "Just against protocol." Then the world went dark as Han finally lost consciousness, his mission complete. 3 days passed before Han opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the white ceiling of the medical bay. The second thing was a blue face with large purple eyes watching him closely. "You're awake," Sora said softly. She was sitting in a chair beside his bed. Han's throat felt dry. He tried to speak, but only a croak came out. Sora quickly held a cup of water to his lips. Han drank slowly, the cool liquid soothing his throat. "Jin?" he managed to ask after a moment. Sora smiled, her eyes bright. "He is well. Better than you, actually. Children recover quickly." Han tried to sit up, but pain shot through his left shoulder. He remembered the falling panel that had hit him during the rescue. "You dislocated your shoulder," Sora explained, "and you had a puncture wound in your leg. The doctors fixed both, but they say you need rest." Han settled back against the pillows. "Commander Day must be furious with me." Sora's expression changed. "He was at first. He said you endangered the entire station by breaking protocol." She paused, then added, "But when he saw that you saved Jin, he changed his mind. He said your punishment would be light." "Worth it," Han said with a small smile. Sora looked down at her hands. "I don't understand why you did it. In Nari culture, we would never risk one life to save another, especially not against the group's decision. It's not logical." "Humans aren't always logical," Han admitted. Sometimes we act on feeling instead of rules. A nurse came in to check Han's condition. After examining him, she smiled. Your oxygen levels are back to normal. The shoulder will be sore for a while, but it's healing well. When can I leave? Han asked. Tomorrow, if you continue to improve, the nurse replied, but no work for at least a week. She left the room, leaving Han and Sora alone again. Jin has been asking for you, Sora said after a moment. He wants to thank you himself, and he says you still need to tell him about elephants. Han laughed, then winced as his shoulder protested. I didn't forget. I'd like to see him too. He's resting now, but he can visit you later, Sora promised. She hesitated, then added, I've been thinking about what you did, about humans. I've worked with your kind for years, but I never really understood you until now. What do you mean? Han asked. You risk so much for individuals. We Nari always think of the group first, the species, the colony, the station. It's how we survived on our harsh world. Sora looked thoughtful. But there is something beautiful about your way too. Before Han could respond, the door opened. Commander Day walked in, his face serious. Engineer Han, he said formally. How are you feeling? Better, sir, Han replied, trying to sit up straighter despite the pain. Day looked uncomfortable. What you did was reckless and against direct orders. Yes, sir. You could have died. You could have caused structural failures that endangered everyone on this station. I understand that, sir. Day's stern expression softened slightly. But you saved a child's life. A child everyone else had given up for dead. He glanced at Sora. Sometimes protocols don't account for human determination. It sounded almost like an apology. Han nodded, accepting it as such. You're suspended. From duty for 2 weeks with pay, Day continued. Consider it time to recover. With a brief nod to both of them, the commander left. That was unexpected, Han said when Day was gone. Sora smiled. Humans are full of surprises, even Commander Day. Later that day, the door opened again. Jin ran in, his blue face bright with excitement. Sora followed behind, smiling at her son's energy. Han, Jin exclaimed. You're awake. Mom said you were sleeping for a long time. Hey, buddy, Han said, happy to see the boy looking so well. I just needed some extra rest. Jin climbed onto the chair next to the bed, his eyes wide. You saved me. Mom said I would have died if you didn't come get me. You saved yourself first, Han pointed out. You were smart to go into that maintenance pod. Jin nodded proudly. I remembered the safety videos. They say if air is going away, find a small space and close it tight. He looked at Sora. Mom said you broke the rules to save me. Sometimes rules need to be broken, Han said. But don't tell your mom I said that. Sora laughed. I heard that. She put her hand on Jin's shoulder. Han risked his life for you. That's something very special. Jin looked thoughtful. Mom says humans care about each person a lot. Is that true? We try to, Han said. Especially children. Jin reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. He held it out to Han. It was the little model Nari ship that Han had followed in the recreation area. I want you to have this, Jin said. It's my favorite. Han carefully took the small toy. Thank you, Jin. I'll keep it safe. And, Jin added eagerly, you still need to tell me about elephants. 1 week later, Han was cleared to return to light duty. His shoulder was still sore, but he could move around easily. To celebrate, Sora invited him to join her and Jin on the observation deck that evening. The observation deck was quiet at this hour. The huge windows showed the stars and the distant asteroids where the mining ships worked. Han found Sora and Jin waiting for him at the far end of the deck. Perfect timing, Sora said as he approached. Jin has been watching for you. Jin was pressing his face against the glass, looking out at the stars. Han, come see, I found Earth. Han stood next to the boy. Jin pointed to a small blue dot among the stars. That's it. Han confirmed. That's where I'm from. It's so small, Jin said, sounding disappointed. But special, Sora added, coming to stand on Jin's other side. I've been thinking about what happened. About what you did, Han? Han looked at her, curious. Our peoples have shared technology, knowledge, culture, Sora continued. But perhaps the most important thing humans have shared with us is this. She gestured toward Jin. This willingness to value each life so deeply. Jin was still staring at Earth, his face full of wonder. Mom says that on your world people run into burning buildings to save strangers, and they dive into deep water to help people who are drowning, and they go into space stations with no air to find lost boys. Han smiled. Not everyone, but many would try. I want to visit Earth someday, Jin said. I want to see the elephants you told me about, and the oceans, and the tall buildings. You'd be welcome, Han said. Sora placed her hand on her son's shoulder. We have much to learn from each other still. She looked at Han. My people have lived among the stars for generations, but there is something your kind has that we are only beginning to understand. What's that? Han asked. The courage to put one life, even a stranger's life, above your own. Sora's eyes shimmered with emotion. It isn't logical, it isn't practical, but it might be the most beautiful thing in the universe. Jin had stopped looking at Earth and was now watching a mining ship move slowly among the asteroids. But Han and Sora kept their eyes on the small blue planet. Home, Han said quietly. A world of heroes, Sora replied. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars, each thinking about the differences between their peoples and the unexpected bridges that could be built between them. Bridges made not of metal or technology, but of courage, compassion, and the shared belief that every life, no matter how small, was worth saving.